Black Desert is an MMORPG set in a high fantasy medieval world developed by the Korean company Pearl Abyss and released to the Western market in 2015. Since then, the game has been published in several regions worldwide such as North America, South America, Europe, South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia, with Europe and NA being the most popular. According to official reports, the game has over 20 million registered players on PC and 50 million players in total, including the console and mobile versions. It's a fairly popular game and is also available on Steam. Black Desert has a box price of $10 but is often heavily discounted or given away for free. While not technically a free-to-play title, the monetization comes almost exclusively from its cash shop or microtransactions, with no subscription or expansion cost. This video is my attempt of introducing Black Desert to you, what makes it stand out and what it does and does not offer to players. Black Desert, BDO for short, is a modern MMO, and you'll probably recognize many of its features if you're already experienced with the genre. But it also does a lot of things differently than most traditional MMOs. Starting with the world. The game is set in a huge open world with no loading screens. You can run, jump, climb, swim, and sail anywhere you want, and this sense of freedom really makes the exploration aspect feel great. It also looks visually gorgeous on higher settings with highly detailed characters and terrain. Cities feel alive with tons of NPC walking around, and the in-game soundtrack is also pretty solid. All in all, the game provides a great sense of immersion, especially when the fast-traveling mechanisms are fairly limited by nature, as it forces you to travel around to get to places. Black Desert also incorporates some old-school MMO elements, such as having to eat food to gain health, having to care for and feed your mount night and day cycle, where monsters actually become stronger at night, having to drink water on the desert, having little to no instant zones, and limited fast travel. There are, however, some concerns with the performance here. You will need an above-average computer to play Black Desert in the highest settings with a good frame rate. And even then, the game will still display some artifacts or graphical pop-in. Click the link in the description below for a full guide on how to optimize your game's performance. What most players probably heard about this game is the combat. BDO has a very different combat system compared to other MMOs, consisting primarily of action and input combinations. It draws a lot of similarities from fighting games where you have super armors, E-frames, and grabs. Skills are almost entirely casted via key combos consisting of your mouse and keyboard instead of a hotbar, and it adds a very mechanical aspect to the combat. The visual and sound effects greatly enhance the experience, turning Black Desert into one of the most satisfying and highest skill cap MMO to date. The class selection is also huge. There are currently 27 playable classes, and each class typically offers 2 sets of weapons which determine your entire skill set. This means there's a lot of playstyles to choose from, and you can further customize them with specific skill and item builds. This might turn some people off, but the classes are gender locked. This means you will be forced to play as a male or a female depending on the class you pick. While there are some classes which act as the male or female counterpart to another class, this does not apply to the majority of them. Once you open up the game for the first time, you will realize how mind-boggling the character creator is. It's probably the most in-depth character creator in any MMO, allowing you to shape the face, hair, and body of your character, as well as individual details such as the shade of your left eyebrow or the iris color of your right eye. To complement this, there's an in-game beauty album in which players can share their character designs. And there are some great designs that very closely resemble celebrities or iconic characters from other games or media. BDO also has a different gameplay loop than more traditional MMOs. You have several goals to pursue, which can be done in different ways. The game doesn't force a particular path on you, and most items are tradable in the market. This means you are mostly free to make silver the way you want to buy the things you want, and the game won't usually force you to engage in activities you aren't interested into. While this is not as freeform as real sandbox games with player-controlled worlds such as EVE Online, the game is relatively freeform when it comes to gameplay. Another thing BDO excels at are the life skills. This game has a lot of professions and provide a game within a game. You can fish, sail a boat, barter for items across the ocean, trade items with a wagon, or manage workers that extract resources or craft items for you. There is cooking, there is alchemy, hunting beasts with muskets, and processing ingredients into higher grades. You can train horses for breeding, you can gather herbs or mine rocks, or tend to your garden for crops. The list goes on. Life skills also have their own gear and level progression, so you can, for example, work towards your cooking level and improve your gathering tools. The world map is split into something called nodes, which you can send NPC workers to passively collect resources. In nodes, you can also rent residences in towns you can later decorate or unlock more storage space, improve the drop rate of grinding spots, or build crafting factory. While the individual life skills are relatively simple, they all interact with each other in various ways, creating a more in-depth experience. Life skills also lead to a lot of roleplay elements. You can craft furniture to decorate your house or manor, and you can build musical instruments and compose and play your own music to others. There are lots of players who play BDO exclusively for this type of content. A lot of players call BDO a PvP-focused game due to the open-world PvP system as well as the node war and siege systems. Players can join guilds and build a fortress to conquer nodes of the map. Guilds can war each other or form alliances to take over castles. And yes, the game does allow for open-world PvP, which you can't opt out once you leave the beginner channels. However, indiscriminate killing leads to heavy karma penalties for the offender, meaning you are very unlikely to get killed without reason in the open world. There's also an instance PvP mode called Arena of Solar, which is the more traditional ranked matchmaking, 3 versus 3 PvP mode. This mode is quite fun and uses its own set of gear, so you don't need to worry about being at a gear disadvantage against veteran players. Most of the competitive PvP modes in this game also share similar gear limitations. So here's my personal pros and cons list of this game. As a veteran player who's been playing for a few years and has also introduced the game to a lot of friends, I'm going to try to keep it as unbiased as possible, as well as weigh in some things of relevance for a new player. Graphics and immersion. BDO is a game that truly feels alive and is a joy to explore. The world is vast and varied, and there are lots of small things to add to the immersion factor, such as volumetric clouds, atmospheric fog, day and night system, equipment wear, and tear. Dynamic lighting, which changes brightness depending on your camera angle. Not many MMOs out there are as good looking as BDO, especially in the remastered mode. The rendering distance is pretty bad though, and it's not uncommon to see objects popping in and out of sight if you're traveling quickly. Combat. While action combat is not for everyone, it's impossible to deny how well BDO achieves it. From the unique fighting game style to extremely well-made animations and sound effects, this is definitely one of the reasons you will want to play the game. This factor also gets continuously built upon by releasing new classes every year, which also feel very unique and varied. Different classes have a different weight to their hits, completely different animations and gameplay styles, and their weapons have a noticeably different feel to them. While BDO is at heart a grinding game, the combat system really makes the grind more bearable over large periods of time. Update cycle and events. Something people don't talk much about is how often Pearl Abyss updates their game. The game usually gets a new patch every week or every 2 weeks, consisting of new events, new quality of life changes, class rebalances, or new features. There just aren't many MMOs out there keeping things fresh as often as BDO does, while larger content updates usually drop by twice a year, such as a new region, or a new class or a new system. I must give it to Pearl Abyss for providing a lot of small things to keep the game fresh between the content drought. When it comes to events, we often get a lot of free stuff such as cash items, costumes, and whatnot, and it's a great help, especially to free-to-play players. For example, last year, we got 2 new classes, a new region, new gameplay systems, the introduction of fast travel, and ton of new grinding zones and items to collect. Casual friendly. While not everyone may agree with this, I find BDO to be a great casual game if you want it to be. There are tons of activities that require very little to no input, so you can easily multitask it while doing something else. The game never pushes you to any kind of group content, so you are free to play at your own pace with no pressure. There's plenty of easy and rewarding PvP content. There are tons of classes to try out, and the game is alt-friendly. You can play dress-up with your characters and decorate your own houses. You have roleplay content like composing and playing music. BDO is not structured around daily or weekly tasks to progress, and most seasonal events are extremely easy to participate, some of which are also made for the more casual crowd, such as fashion or music competitions. PvP's OP is also a strong contender, although this might be a controversial take for some people. The combat system in Black Desert naturally leads to a lot of skill expression, and there is no shortage of opportunities to demonstrate it. There's conventional open-world skirmishing with duels and guild wars, organized teamwork with Arena of Solari, chaotic player killing with the No Karma Full PvP Arsha server, to massive political guild efforts such as node wars and sieges that take dozens to hundreds of players. And since some of these modes are partially or completely gear capped, there's always something for everyone. Long-term progression. This is one of the defining aspects of the game. In BDO, there's a huge, almost infinite treadmill of item progression, and unlike most MMOs, there are no periodic gear resets. Instead, the game is a series of small, almost insignificant steps that all add up in your journey. This means the items you made several years ago can still be usable today. You might be using a weapon for several months or even years. Some best-in-slot items right now have existed since the game launched. The progression is extremely fast early on thanks to seasoned servers. But as you approach the higher end of the spectrum, the next upgrade becomes harder and more expensive to get for smaller and smaller stat gains. New best-in-slot items are added seldomly over time and consist of very inconsequential improvements only for the most hardcore of players out there. Black Desert is a marathon, not a race, and is designed for long-term progression where your items aren't completely devaluated every time a new update hits. While this causes concerns for PvP, where you'd be at a huge disadvantage against a longtime player, this is also why so many competitive modes have stat caps these days. So, this all sounds nice, but every game also has its problems. Not all of these personally affect me much, but I've tried to compile an unbiased list that is relevant for a beginner. Some of these cons can also be positives for some players. Complexity. This game has a lot of gameplay systems and a lot of different items. The combat is very different than what most people are used to, and the default UI is extremely cluttered with information overload. There's pop-ups, login rewards, notifications, and items you have no idea what to do with. Classes start with like 15 skills at level 1. BDO is a difficult game to get into by yourself, and while it's not as complex as something like EVE Online, this is most definitely the main turnoff for most players. I have 2 pieces of advice for anyone who starts the game. Take it slowly. Don't worry about items you get along the way. Store them in towns until you need them. Follow the main quests and try to get a feel for your class and see if you like it before anything else. And second, go to your settings like this and turn off every alert and notification that is enabled by default. Not for traditional PvE players. If all you want from an MMO is running quests, dungeons, and raids, I'm sorry to say this probably isn't the game for you. While Black Desert does have some variety of world bosses and dungeons, this is mostly side content and it's not fleshed well enough to be your focus. Most of the gameplay loop is going to consist of mob grinding or life skilling for a PvE player, and there's no point expecting otherwise. Black Desert does feature some above-average questing for an MMO now that they've started voice acting every quest, but it's still nothing to write home about. Pearl Abyss has been making improvements to these aspects over the years by including better quest lines in recent updates and adding more and more forms of challenging player versus environment, such as party dungeons and boss rush encounter. But in practice, you will probably want to play World of Warcraft instead for a traditional PvE experience. a solo player's dream. This one is either a pro or a con, depending on who you ask, but I'm placing it here. BDO is a game that will never force you to group up with other people. This doesn't mean it has no group content, it just means there's usually nothing forcing you to engage with group content. There are group grinding zones where you party with other people, but you generally only go there unless you need a particular drop or personally enjoy the spot. Dungeons are good money, but they don't drop anything vital to your progression. Node wars and sieges can give you large payouts and some items for participating with your guild and conquering nodes. But again, you can make that kind of money grinding by yourself. If you're a player who just wants to log in and do your own thing and occasionally jump into a group activity on your own terms, then Black Desert is a perfect game for you. If you're looking for a group-centric experience, then you're probably better off with other games. Repetitive gameplay. I've said it before, but Black Desert is a grindy game in nature. It does not restrict you in playtime or daily activities, so the more you play, the more you will progress. Whether you're grinding for levels, knowledge, rare drops, silver, or herbs, most of the gameplay loop basically boils down to grind enough silver or resources for your next goal. Set your next goal, then grind for that goal again. Rinse and repeat. It sounds simplistic, and nearly any MMO can be reduced to this formula, but it's far more prevalent in sandbox-style games, since there's no structured gameplay systems trying to disguise the grind. Again, this is also a positive for some people, but I'd rather put it here. Unbalanced PVP and PvTE. I'm not going to elaborate on this much since a new player won't understand everything, but you can wonder how they managed to keep 27 classes, each with 2 skill sets, in a state of balance. That's the neat thing. They don't. While balance is not as bad as it used to be, there's still a significant performance difference between classes in some content. Since the game has a fairly high skill cap, it is actually possible to rise above these handicaps if you're really good with a class, but most of the time players will stick to easier, meta classes that take minimal effort to compete. There are no unviable classes, but there are definitely some favorites. Upgrade system. This list would not be complete otherwise. One of the most hated aspects of the game is undoubtedly the upgrading system, which is where most of your item power comes from. Black Desert features a very old-school, Korean MMO-inspired gear upgrading system, where items have to continuously be upgraded with a random chance in order to increase their stats, and the more you upgrade, the lower the chances of your next success will be. Failing to upgrade items can either downgrade or even destroy some items completely, such as accessories. While the game is very transparent with your odds and results, it's basically playing roulette, meaning you can waste your silver or even lose progress if unlucky. The good news? You can avoid upgrading completely. Simply save enough silver and purchase your own gear from the market after you're done with your beginner gear, or use some of the new guaranteed upgrade method they've introduced. In fact, most players buy their gear instead of enhancing, and it's often statistically cheaper to do so. You can still be a gambler if it tickles your fancy, and it makes for great content sometimes, but more conservative players will want to buy their own gear instead. So, not really a cut for most people, but I can see how someone with a gambling addiction might struggle with this. Monetization and fashion. Another controversial aspect of the game, which has its own section later in this video. BDO is a game with a large microtransaction shop ranging from character and horse costumes, inventory and weight extensions, looting peats, portable repair tents, and pseudo-subscriptions which offer various in-game perks. And I get it, while they are not strictly needed, this might tick some people off. The good news is that the game has improved a lot in this regard over the years, meaning that a new player is much less required to buy these items because a lot of them are either earned for free organically or just aren't as needed anymore due to several changes the game took over the years. If you enjoy collecting costumes, dyeing your clothes, and so on, you'll be disappointed to know that nearly all the fashion is locked in the cash shop. The game does give out free costumes from time to time, and you are also able to buy costumes from other players. But if collecting cosmetics in-game is your thing, then this isn't the game for you. Monetization. Lots of things have changed with the game. And there's a lot of wrong or outdated information out there, mostly from older content. As said before, this game offers a large microtransaction shop because the game has a lot of gameplay systems. For example, there are specific costumes that improve each life skill, specific items that improve your grinding by looting, specific items to reroll horse skills, and so on. There's certainly no shortage of pay-to-convenience items you can buy, or, as I like to call it, pay to remove the inconveniences. While this might seem scary at first, Pearl Abyss has made lots of changes over the years to severely reduce how much a person needs to spend to have an enjoyable experience with the game. There are more detailed videos about this subject in the description you can watch, so don't just take my word for it. Also, most items from the cash shop can be bought from other players in the market, and the prices are generally very low since they're capped by the developers. So here comes the inevitable question. Is Black Desert pay to win? Now, this is a bit of a loaded question since different people have different definitions of what pay to win is, but I'm going to give you my definition and judge the game by it. To me, any game where you can directly or indirectly buy in-game power or buy progress by legal means is considered pay to win. Yes, this means that pretty much every MMO under the sun is pay to win in some form. There's nuance to most things in life, however, and games are no exception. It is possible to turn real-life money into in-game silver by selling costumes, which makes Black Desert objectively pay to win. It's a fixed ratio set by the developers, which usually consists of selling a €34 costume for the equivalent silver of 30 minutes to 2 hours of in-game grinding, depending on if you're an end-game player or a beginner. Costume sales can make the price cheaper. In a game that takes thousands of hours to progress, this is prohibitively expensive for the 99.9% of players, but nevertheless, some players still do it. There are a few time perks you can buy that act as a soft subscription and give you several bonuses such as reduced market tax, extra inventory slots, unlimited armor dies, and boosted experience. There are several items that were once considered important but are now given for free often or just aren't needed as much anymore because of in-game changes. And while the item shop is pretty overpriced outside of bundles or discount periods, they do not lock any item inside loot boxes. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide where you draw the line of what a game should or should not sell in its item shop. The standard cost of a subscription MMO, which is a yearly €60 expansion and monthly €15 subscription, is more than enough to have a great experience free of restrictions in Black Desert. As a personal anecdote, I've spent less than that over the years and I have a great experience with no major hurdles. While there are still some things left with terrible monetization, such as a system called the Ferry, which is awful for free-to-play players, and a few mandatory purchases in the long term, like the repair campsite, Black Desert is far less predatory than it used to be and offers a lot of content and entertainment value compared to the money you'll be spending. You can, however, still swipe in the tens of thousands of dollars to get to end game level faster than someone else. This will definitely give you an edge, even though most of the competitive content in this game is stat capped nowadays. So in conclusion, Black Desert is a different type of MMO that does open world and combat pretty well, while also sacrificing some of the mainstream MMORPG aspects. The game has a lot of content and a lot of progression, and will certainly keep you entertained for a long time if you can get past the complexity early on. Black Desert is more accessible than ever thanks to seasoned servers and several other catch-up mechanics. It's also designed to go after your wallet, but that is something much more manageable nowadays. All in all, it's probably one of the best MMOs out there, and it keeps improving at a constant pace. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give a like or a subscribe below if you enjoyed this content, and I will see you next time.